Part of what makes my autism challenging for me is just the differences in communication with how I communicate as an autistic person and how the majority of people, neurotypical people in our society communicate. And one of the very apparent things that I notice is different is I'm a very direct and very just clear in the way that I communicate. You may have noticed in the videos, I try to think really hard about my word choice to accurately convey what I'm trying to get across. And I am very intentional with how I do it. And what I notice is that, and this is kind of a generalization, but it's just an observation that I've began to notice as I have observed how neurotypical people communicate, and it's that the majority, probably not all, but most neurotypical people I find don't always say what they mean. There's always hidden meanings or hidden intentions, or just what they say is not actually what they mean. And what they mean isn't what they say. And this is hard for a few reasons. The first is because I really have a hard time reading between the lines when it comes to things like that. I'm really good at noticing patterns, and I feel like I'm really good at observing things and analyzing things. But when it comes to trying to figure out what people are meaning based on what they say when they don't actually say what they mean, it feels really hard and it feels really challenging. And I might be able to figure it out maybe a few days or a few weeks later, but in the moment, I take people for their word. I assume, which might not be the best thing considering what I'm sharing here, but I assume that people say exactly what they mean when they really don't. And this is hard because I interpret it the wrong way, and then because I understand it the wrong way, the way I respond or the way I act based on what they say might not actually be what they wanted, and then they misperceive me. And it's just this cycle of misunderstanding. And I really just wish that everyone could say exactly what they mean. And I wish that everyone could be very clear and very direct and very specific with their word choice and the things that they say. And it makes it hard to, I guess, understand other people, and it makes it hard to feel understood by other people. I also have a hard time communicating because it feels like a lot of conversations amongst neurotypical people are just really surface level. And frankly, I find them boring. I want to, if I'm having a conversation with someone, I want to know about that person. I don't just want to have a conversation just to have a conversation, because that's exhausting. And conversing is pretty exhausting for me, just with trying to analyze what they're trying to say, and then with all the inputs going into my brain from different sensory things happening in the environment, and the eye contact aspect of it. And so if I'm having a conversation with someone, I want it to be a meaningful conversation, because it is something that requires a lot of effort and a lot of work and just a lot of brain power on my end. And I don't want to have the superficial conversations. And I don't want this to sound selfish, and I think that this is definitely related to it's definitely related to my autism, but I really like to talk about the things that I care about. And I could talk about my special interests, or the things that I'm really passionate about, or the things that interest me. I could talk about that all day long, and I want to share that with people. And that's one of the ways that I express friendship and I express love for other people, is by sharing those things with other people. And it's kind of hard when you're in a conversation with someone and you don't really know how to converse with them in a way where it feels like both people can gain something from that conversation. It often feels like it is just one-sided on the neurotypical person's end, because it almost, and as I'm like putting this into words, I feel like, I'm not sure if this is going to make sense to anyone, but it almost feels like a lot of communication with neurotypical people, it feels like one-sided on their end. Like they're trying to get something out of that conversation, and a lot of times the things that they're trying to get out of that conversation aren't explicitly said, and it's just hard. It's just really hard. And I think another reason why communication for me as an autistic person is hard is because of my like delayed processing. I mentioned like sensory overwhelm, and when I'm in a social setting, there's all kinds of sensory inputs, and it is pretty overstimulating, especially in like a loud restaurant or a coffee shop where there's like that ambient background noise of like clanging forks and just like the chatter of people and dishes being thrown around and music playing, and because of this, I often have a hard time finding like the right word choice or just like processing what the other person is saying. And there's times where I will like ruminate on the conversation, not really out of like anxiety or like fear of how I was perceived, but because I'm still processing the conversation. And that will happen like maybe the next day, or it honestly sometimes takes weeks, or there's times where it has taken like a month to fully process just like one conversation and to try to figure out, oh, okay, that's what that person meant. And then I'm like, oh, well, because now I understand that, this is how I should have responded instead of the way that I did respond. And then it's just hard. And so I thought I would share in this video today just like some ways how communicating for me with neurotypical people can be challenging. And I think that a lot of people don't really understand this about autism and like what's going on inside of our brains when we're having conversations with other people. So maybe if you are neurotypical, you can take this into consideration and try to be just like a little bit more understanding. Or if there is like a gap of silence in the conversation, maybe it is just because I'm trying to process everything and it's not because I'm not interested in what you're saying. And if you're autistic, maybe some of these things might resonate with you and help give you a little bit more of an understanding of why communication for you is also hard like it is for me. If there's any other things you can think of why communicating is challenging with neurotypical people as an autistic person, I'd love if you could let me know in the comments below, and maybe share if you have like tips or ways to overcome these difficulties. I'd absolutely love if you could share that.